Welcome to the Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast, a podcast we are seeking to lead change. We're also seeking to understand. We are also here as a platform for leaders to come together, to unite, to develop and empower other leaders in the areas of business, family, faith, and community. I'm your host, Lafayette Lane, joined by my co-host, John LeBron, and today we are joined by our special guest, Catie Harris. Make Catie feel right at home. Put those hands together, put those clap emojis in the comment section. Catie has joined us today to talk to us about being a nurse-preneur, how to create six-figure businesses for nurses. She is a PhD, MBA, and registered nurse. She is the Nurse-Preneur Mentor who has empowered thousands of nurses to monetize their knowledge and skills in businesses while inspiring them to change the way healthcare is perceived and delivered. She also strives to undo the perception that nursing care is limited to the hospital setting. Through her intensive mentorship program, Catie shows nurses how their nursing knowledge can transcend the hospital system into a profitable business. And today, again, she's right here on the Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast to have this discussion. Catie, thanks for coming on.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we just read a little bit about your bio, but tell us a little bit more about who you are, where you're from, and what you do, Catie.
Well, I've been a nurse for 20 plus years, and I'm in Philadelphia. And, I really got into this from the hospital setting. It's been 20 years working on a neurosurgery service and just wanted to grow and learn more things. And it was one of those things that they didn't want me to grow and learn. They wanted me to just stay in my lane. And it was very frustrating. And a lot of nurses feel that. They feel that, like, what else am I going to do? Where am I going with this? And, I was just tired of the bedside and wasn't quite sure where to go. So I was always entrepreneurial. Even when I was like 6 years old, I remember selling lemonade to construction workers that were building stuff in my neighborhood. But it's always been on my mind. It was always like I wanted to do something more. I wanted to have some sort of impact and leave some sort of legacy. So the whole question of what else can I do and where do I go from here really led me down this path of looking into entrepreneurial gigs. And I found a lot of them, obviously most of them didn't last, but this one was very powerful because it spoke to me and I just had this idea and ran with it. So that's where I am. I'm here now 6 years later running this business, the Nurse-Preneurs.
That's incredible. Now, you talked about how changing the way healthcare is perceived and delivered. I'm not in the healthcare field. John and I are in the technology space. We do IT for a living. So what do you mean by that when you talk about how healthcare is perceived and delivered?
Yeah, so healthcare is very transactional. And I don't know if you've ever gone to the doctor or the nurse practitioner or into the healthcare system at all. And it's just kind of like, what's your insurance? Here's your bill and here's your script. Go get it done, lose 20 pounds and see me in 6 weeks. Like, that is the healthcare system that we have. And that's really all it has time for, because the providers have literally 11 minutes to see their patients in a given day. And they'll have a panel of 30 or 40 patients. And even in the hospital system where I worked mostly, it's almost, I always imagined the patients being on this conveyor belt, because I would come in and I would have 8 ICU patients as the nurse practitioner. I would move out 6 of them, get 6 more. And it was just kind of this constant movement of people. And unfortunately, a lot of them they stay in my memory as a collective, but I don't remember all that many patients because they move so quickly through. So I can only imagine the impact that has on a patient when they're in the bed, especially in a neurosurgical service. And I worked intensive care, so it was brain injury, ruptured brain aneurysms, brain bleeds, life-threatening types of conditions. And to kind of go through that system like that in a very transactional way is not something that I think we should be proud of. And it's something that I want to change. And I think it's something we can change.
That is great and very insightful. Very insightful. So how you talk about making that change, what are you doing as that entrepreneur? You talk about the entrepreneur side to change that perception of healthcare, nursing care that's just limited to the hospital setting and beyond.
Right. So one of the things that I realized early on in my career, so I have, I'm a dedicated school goer, and it's like the biggest joke in my family because I kept going back for degrees, and I'm like, I got my MBA, and then I got a master's, and I got another master's, and I got a PhD, and then I got another master. Oh, it's ridiculous. And each time I went in to get this degree, I kept thinking something was going to happen, and what happened is that I ended up back in the hospital system doing what I always did. And there's this hierarchy in the hospital where you have the nursing, and then on the totem pole is the medical docs, if you will. And as a nurse practitioner with 20 years experience, I only ranked as high to talk to the lowest man on the totem pole in the medical hierarchy. So I found that very frustrating, and I needed an outlet. I needed something else, and I needed to feel like I was contributing in some way, because what I was contributing was putting out fires so the intern didn't get in trouble. And that's not the way, I wanted to run healthcare. So I'm like, there has to be a better way. And in one of my scenarios, I had a patient, and I really needed to get this patient out of the hospital. He was a stroke patient, had to get him out because we needed that bed. And that sounds terrible, but that was the situation, except they didn't want to leave. And I was like, all right, you have to leave. You can't stay here. And I finally realized that the reason that they didn't want to leave was because they were so scared. Imagine you had a stroke, and of course you're scared, right? So scared to go home because they wouldn't have the security of the hospital staff around them. So if they got a headache or a twinge or something, whatever feeling, they wouldn't have anybody to talk to. So I said, here's my cell phone number. Just call me, text me, whatever, for the next 30 days. And I'll take care of it. And they're like, oh, this is great. Thank you so much. And they left. And, I think they called me once. And after that, I discovered Medicare has this program called transitional care, where you can actually bill patients or bill Medicare and get $300 a month per patient. And that was the exact service, right? That you would follow up with those patients at 24, 48 hours. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. This would be great. I'm just going to work with patients as they leave the hospital, and I can be that kind of go-between for them. So really kind of listening to what the problems were. And that was one way that I wanted to change healthcare, was by offering this service to give them that comfort when they were leaving the hospital. So they had a human person that they knew that they could trust and they could talk to when they got home.
Very interesting. So you had mentioned on one of your pages that you're teaching people to build businesses using their current expertise. What types of expertise do you typically look for? Or maybe you're not looking for a specific one. Which type are you finding?
So nurses have a very wide range, as you can imagine. So, I have nurses that have spent their whole life on, let's say, an oncology ward, cancer ward, right? And they've specialized in, let's say, breast cancer. So they can take that knowledge. They literally they've worked 5 years, they've worked 10,000 hours. And that's, the golden magical number. If you have 10,000 hours of practice in something, you become a master. But that's just 3 to 5 years. I have nurses that are 20 years out, which means they have tens and tens of thousands of hours working with breast cancer patients. When I started in entrepreneurial circles, I saw people who knew somebody who had breast cancer, and they're like, oh, I'm going to make this my mission in life, and I'm going to help people with breast cancer, which is wonderful. However, it doesn't compare to the nurse who has this experience of thousands and thousands of patients who have gone through the breast cancer experience, and that expertise that they have, the knowledge of the science behind it, what works, what doesn't work, helping the patients cope afterwards, which is a huge problem in cancer. Once you go into remission, it's kind of like all your resources go away, and that's where patients become very vulnerable. So bringing that expertise to the patients in a very, I'm going to say, non-healthcare related way, meaning that they're open to many different ideas and philosophies of Western medicine, Eastern medicine, holistic medicine, and just letting the patients talk and help them through that cancer treatment. So that type of expertise, someone like myself with 20 years neurosurgery experience, with the stroke patients, we did that with neurosurgery first assist. So we have nurses that work with the surgeons in the OR, and we train nurses to do that. So that was another area of expertise that I had. And then I've had nurses who worked with patients with lupus or multiple sclerosis and really just kind of help them through their journey.
So you had mentioned, though, that on your website, it says something about if you don't have a degree. Like, I look at your list and you have about as many degrees as a thermometer. But somebody with less qualification, how can they, two-part question, how can they become a partner and sort of nursepreneur? And is this occupation require them to leave their current situation, or do they have, is it kind of a progression, or how does that work?
Okay, I'll answer the second question first, which is it's definitely a progression because it, as you know, any entrepreneurial journey is going to be a varying lengths depending on what kind of mindset blocks and obstacles you put up. But for me, you're right. I have lots of degrees, so people will say, "Well, you know, you're special. You have all these degrees. Of course, you can do this stuff." But one of the things that I found out early on is that I had a lot of mindset issues in the beginning, and I was chugging away at this business, and I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Why can't I figure it out? Everybody else is making like $1 million with their funnel, and I can't make $2 to save my life. And then I met this associate's degree nurse, and she put this business together, and she was doing awesome like 6 weeks later. And I thought, it's not the degrees. The degrees that I have are, they're great and they make me look prestigious and authoritative, but they don't make me a good entrepreneur. And to rest on the degrees and think that these are going to help me in business was just really the wrong approach the entire way. So I try and minimize the degrees as much as possible because, the MBA alone, that teaches you to work in corporate, right? It doesn't help you start a business. And actually I had to unlearn a lot of the things that I learned in my MBA degree. None of my master's degree or my PhD have taught me anything about running a business. So they're really useless in my business. Like, they don't give me anything other than credibility, which is huge. But at the same time, I think having a brand wrapped around you and case studies or testimonials or just emphasizing your experience and your expertise goes way further than, all the degrees that you could put behind your name.
You talk about your intensive mentorship program. What does that entail?
So we have coaching cohorts of where we work with 4 nurses at a time in very close proximity to help them to discover that expertise. Because as you can imagine, the mindset piece when you're building a business like that is huge, right? So they can come up, they have the patient population, they know who they want to work with. Let's say it's multiple sclerosis, and I'm thinking of a nurse in particular. So multiple sclerosis, she's going to do coaching with these patients, and she's going to help them do X, Y, and Z. She's got her packages and all that. And the next move, right, is to start telling people that you have a business, start connecting with people who maybe work with that patient population, such as MS doctors or whatever. And invariably, there's a million reasons why they can't do it, why they can't do it this week or this month or whatever. And it all comes back to the mindset piece and believing that they have the permission to do it and that they're the ones that need to step up and do it. And so that's where we come in with intensive coaching to not just show them the business, because that's the easy part. We can put the business together pretty quickly, but implementing the business because they believe they can do it is a whole nother ball game. And that's what we work with the nurses with very intimately.
Absolutely. So just for clarification, you're not still actively doing nursing. You're doing entrepreneurship full time, correct?
Well, I like to think that I'm still nursing. Okay. I say once a nurse, always a nurse, but I'm not working in the hospital system. Let's say that. Gotcha.
Okay. Go ahead, bro.
So this question came to mind as I was sort of planning for this. I'm looking at, I don't want to get into a vaccination debate, but at all, for real.
You opened it.
No, I really don't.
I do. No.
Yeah. Anyways, But but I see a lot of news reports with nurses leaving the field due to demands of getting vaccinated. Whether someone feels they should be mandated or not, that's not really relevant to the conversation. That it could be, but it's not going to be, I guess. But essentially, some nurses are getting pushed out of the field. How does that affect this being a nursepreneur? And would it, in fact, the nursepreneurship give another opportunity for those with experience in nursing who no longer can nurse within the hospital?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to have those nurses. And in fact, they have studies that show 33% of nurses that enter into the nursing field, finish their 4-year degree. Before that first year is over, they have left for a new profession. 50% of nurses have an intent to leave the profession. So these nurses that, it's kind of a bigger, broader question that you're asking, because COVID has really just unleashed a whole showing of how the hospital system treats nurses more as commodities that are replaceable. So we're going to furlough you, and then you come back when we tell you to come back, and this kind of stuff. And we're just replaceable. And that's how I felt years ago, which is why I left. But I think COVID has exposed it to a whole new level. And yeah, those nurses that are leaving the profession, whether it's because they're not going to get vaccinated or because they're just exhausted of beating their head against the wall because they're not getting anything done in the hospital system, those are the nurses that tend to gravitate towards us. And they have 20-30 years experience, and they're going to go be a barista at Starbucks, which is great. There's nothing against that, but oh my God, like come to Nurse-Preneurs, like let us tap into that knowledge.
So can you give clarification to then if a nurse says, I don't agree with what's going on within my profession, I need a pivot. I got to go something slightly different. I've been doing this so long. This is what I know. This is what I do best. Love helping people. I think of nurses kind of like teachers. They got into it for one certain reason, and then as they get into it, they realize there's so much more to the profession than they ever hoped for. More as in more red tape, more things to deal with than actually helping people. How can you walk us through or unpack how it is that if someone says, hey, Nurse-Preneurs, I need help, what does that look like?
Oh, wow. Okay. So when the nurses come to us, and they come to us for a variety of reasons, but most of it's just, the bedside's tough, and patients aren't getting smaller. They're getting heavier, and it's just physically demanding job on top of everything. So a lot of people, especially in their 40s and 50s, are like, I can't keep doing this. And nursing is such a huge, huge field. You could work at NASA as a nurse. You can work at the school as a nurse. You can work anywhere. There's really no place that a nurse doesn't really belong. So one of the first things that we like to do is talk about their career and what they've done and what they like about what they've done. And, for me, the first step is just having a very casual conversation, trying to get to know that person and their personality and how they like to work and that kind of stuff. So, I usually start off the conversation with, imagine you had, $1 trillion and all the time in the world. And after you went to every beautiful beach in the world and you're bored of massages, like, what would you do with yourself? And that's where I'm looking for them to talk about things that they might not have imagined they could do. So I had a nurse that had come to me at one point and she's like, I want to be a health coach. And I said, okay. But every time I talked to her about being a health coach, she was really depressing. And I was just like, oh my God, this is going to not work out at all. Like this woman just does not like health coaching. But then we were in a meeting we had a meetup with a bunch of nurses, and one of the nurses was complaining that she couldn't do this tech and system stuff. And this nurse who wanted to be a health coach was like, oh my God. And she jumped in and she just revamped her entire funnel and active campaign and created all this stuff for her. And I was like, you didn't tell me that you liked computers. I didn't know that you liked tech and system and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, there's a place for you there. And she was so happy. She was so excited. And from there, we were able to craft a business where she actually works within Nurse-Preneurs now and helps our nurses with their funnels in active campaign and Jotform and all kinds of different areas.
On your website, you talk about having unshakable self-belief in business. I think that's really critical for those who want to be in the entrepreneurship. Because again, we're talking about nursepreneurs, but I think that this principle goes beyond the nursing and the health field. It's a principle that can be applied to any area of business. So when you talk about unshakable self-belief in business, what do you mean by that?
I mean that you have to believe that you can do it, and you have to be all in. And we have multiple different courses. I have all different types of courses, and I have students that jump from course to course to course to course, thinking that something is going to happen if they take that course. And honestly, nothing's going to happen if you take that course. What's going to happen is once you decide that you're all in a program and you want to take it to the next level, you have to verbally commit to the process. So my sister right now is interested in taking our IV. We have an IV hydration course, and she's interested in taking that. And she's like, "Oh, but I don't know business, and I don't know this, and I don't know that." And I was like, "Oh my God, stop!" I mean, all you need to do is say, "I'm going to do this. I'm going to see it through, and I'm going to make it happen." And I said, everything else will just open up from there. But if you're going to dip one toe in the water to see if it works, I promise you about 3,000 obstacles are going to come up and 20,000 reasons why you can't do this. But all you need is one reason. You just have to want it, and you have to believe that you can do it.
Yeah. If you're looking for an obstacle, it'll show up within 5 minutes.
It will.
Go ahead, man.
Oh, no, bro. Go ahead. You're good.
So part of then what you're teaching is not necessarily just you're not even in having to teach the practice of nursing stuff. It's more of teaching these well-rounded nurses or nurses with specific expertise in nursing now how to just be a business owner. That's where the mindset shift really goes, it sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. There's certainly a confidence level there that because one of my first programs, I said, leverage your nursing expertise and turn it into a business. And I thought that was pretty clear. But when I got on the phone with nurses, they wanted me to tell them what business they were going to start. And I was like, I don't know. You need to tell me what kind of business you're going to start. And I realized that message wasn't clear. It required way too much work on their part in a lot of ways. So, we had to, that's why we started creating programs for them. But now I'm kind of back to that, let's talk about this expertise that you have. And so this is where our small cohort coaching comes in, where we work with just a couple of nurses at a time. And they'll tell us what their expertise is. So I have a student that does wound care. She's an expert in wound care and helps home care agencies who have wound care patients. Now, in home care, having a wound care patient is very, very expensive because of the practices that they do. And the practices are actually outdated and somewhat harmful to the patients, which is a little disturbing. And they get dinged a lot by Medicare. So they don't like to take these wound care patients. So she's coming in with her expertise, which is wound care, and saying, that's not the way that you should be doing it. This is the way that you should be doing it. And this is what's going to help the patients. And she can take a patient that has taken 6 weeks to heal and heal them in 1 to 2 weeks just by changing up the regime of how they do wound care. So that kind of stuff is really, really powerful. And we have another nurse who transitions. She's a turnaround specialist and helps long-term care agencies from going bankrupt and from being hit by all kinds of fines from Medicare for the way that the property is run. So yeah, these different levels of expertise, and it's all over the map. So it's really just a matter of them coming with something specific that they have in mind, and we just help them wrap the business around it, and then show them how to run that.
So is there any areas then that you see or that there's a lack of expertise currently from the nurse-preneurs? Like maybe it's insurance or something along those lines, that if someone said, I have something in this, you'd say, wow, we have nothing there right now.
Oh my God. Yes. Yeah. There's lots of places. One of the programs that we do have is chronic care management, which is a Medicare program that actually prevents patients from being remitted into the hospital just by simple care coordination, right? So if a doctor, let's say your mom goes to a doctor's office, right? And they see her for 11 minutes and then 6 months later, they see her again. Medicare's program says, well, if you spend an additional 20 minutes and actually follow up with her and call her on the phone and maybe coordinate some services for her, the reduction rate in readmissions is massive. And they spend about $14,000 per patient on Medicare in readmissions. So Medicare came out with this program where they will pay, and they pay a lot of money to implement this care coordination. But because it's Medicare, it's super complicated and annoying and just hard to do. Mm-hmm. So our nurses are able to, they act as consultants, and less than 20% of primary cares at this moment are utilizing that Medicare program, which is just really shameful at some level. So yeah, we need tons of chronic care management consultants in that area.
Did you guys do anything then? Just curious. That's just an off the wall question. You go ahead, Lafayette. You guys do anything then within like the direct pay sort of area? I personally don't even have insurance, and Lafayette doesn't even know this. I have things covering my family.
Why?
But I don't use a traditional insurance plan, meaning I do a direct pay physician. So I pay a doctor a monthly thing, kind of like a health club. And I show he has way less patients. I can come in basically any day and any time I want, and he takes care of my family like the other doctors do. I use a Sedera plan. So Sedera is like a you pay a monthly thing, kind of like you would insurance, and you have sort of a deductible, but then it covers expenses over a deductible. It's very similar to insurance, but my things go through a cash pay, meaning, so for example, my wife used to go and get blood work. And every time she went and go through the insurance, it would come back and it would bill me $350 for blood work at the lab. I'm like, what is going on? This is ridiculous. Fast forward. I go to the direct pay thing, start there. He says, hey, welcome, blah, blah. She's telling about some issues he's having. He's like, all right, well, we'll have to do some blood work. I'm like, hold on. Through the insurance cost me $350 every time, which is outrageous. And he goes, oh, well, I just give you, it's my cost. Same, what lab? I told him, okay. He's like, yeah, same thing. He goes, it'll cost you $35. Yep. No insurance, cash pay. Yeah, Lafayette, you're looking at me with judgment eyes there. And yeah, $35, dude. And
no judgment eyes. I'm just trying to figure out how we brothers, we friends. You didn't tell me about this, but we'll talk after the recording. You have my number. Yeah. All right.
So, these are all new things I've just done in the last few months. So that's why. But I realized how much the insurance cost me going through that. So I feel like there's got to be opportunities for these same nurses in that field. And I got to imagine people are moving towards this same direct pay or Sedera plans and so forth, because what I was paying in insurance was getting ridiculous and it wasn't covering anything.
No. Yeah, no, the insurance, I mean, they're the most powerful players in healthcare, and it's very frustrating because there's no transparency whatsoever. So ironically, and that area is called direct primary care. And back in 2012, that was because I'm a nurse practitioner, that was one of the areas that I thought, I'm going to start this membership program. It's going to be direct primary care model, and I'll just have a panel of 500 patients, which might sound like a lot, but a normal primary care has about 5,000.
Correct.
So I thought this was a great idea. One of the problems was that I didn't have an unshakable self-belief that I could do it. So that kind of fell to the side, but it's an absolutely incredible model. And it's, I have interviewed some nurses on my podcast about that model. I'm very excited about it. The IRS does still, trying to say that DPC or direct primary care is insurance, and it's not, but it's the way of the future. After one of the things that stopped me from doing direct primary care was I ended up getting hired by corporate Walmart to work they have clinics down south in South Carolina, Georgia, and Texas that our nurse practitioner run. And one of the dying wishes of Sam Walton apparently was to create transparency in healthcare, because he was in his old age, he was dying of multiple myeloma, and he would go to the hospital and needed an MRI, and he would say, how much is this MRI going to cost? And nobody could tell you. It depends. It depends on like 63 different factors that your insurance company is going to negotiate, and it could be $300, it could be $5,000, and anywhere in between.
On your website, you talk about entrepreneurs versus wealth builders. I think that's interesting. What do you mean by that?
So one of the phenomena that I've had is that I'll have nurses call me and they'll say, how to make money really fast. And I'm like, I don't know, go pick up some overtime shifts. Or they'll say, how do I, how do I get out of debt? Or can you give me these extended payment plans because I have all this debt and I don't have any money? And I'd say, look, if you don't have any money, then you can't start a business because that's what you need, money to start this business. I'm like, you're going to need at least $5,000 or $10,000 in cash or credit just to get this launched and off the ground. And that's really lowballing it. So, my course price is not the problem here. So, and then I have some nurses that come in and that's all they want is just money. And I'm like, entrepreneurialism to me is solving a problem and making an impact. And if you want to do those things, the money will follow. But you have to do those things because you love doing them. And it took me 3 years to make any money. So if I didn't love what I was doing, it would never have blossomed into what it is now, which is it's a 7-figure business at this point. But, for 3 years, it was a negative $300,000 business, So that has to be, the goal has to be the impact. The goal has to be changing lives and making your legacy, learning, growing, and going on that journey. If you want to get out of debt, if you want to save money for the future, if you just want to go on vacation, oh my God, go, I don't know, get the Mint app and start sacking away money for your vacation, but don't start a business. That's just not the right way to go.
A quick few bucks is why they have pizza delivery.
Yeah.
Being serious, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But
what are some of the common myths of business that you found in your entrepreneurial journey?
That you're just one funnel away, which makes me crazy. Because for me, like, I chased after a lot of those kind of messages for a while because I'm like, oh, there's something wrong with me. I put this funnel together and I'm not making $1 million like everybody else. And also that concept of making the money without spending the money, right? So there's two concepts there. The one with the funnel is that all the pieces have to be in place for the funnel to work. And if the pieces aren't in place, it doesn't matter how amazing the funnel is or how fast the funnel is or how pretty the funnel is. If the pieces aren't in place, you don't have the right audience, you don't know who you're talking to, you don't have the right message, your copy's no good, the funnel's not going to work. It just doesn't make any sense. So to focus on the research, the audience, and the problem that you're trying to solve is the most vital thing that you can do. Then your funnel can suck and you still make money because if people believe you, then they'll forgive your bad funnel skills. And then the second myth for me is that, making the money quickly is going to happen. And it just, it took me, I'm going to say I spent probably somewhere around $50,000 or $60,000 before I made my first $1,000. And, I was like, woo, I made $1,000. But then it's like, oh, but I got to have a $49,000 debt here, So it just, and I'm sure it can come fast for other people. But typically, I think, when you read these books like, oh, I started a business in 24 hours and it cost me no money. Typically, that person has had experience running a business before. This is not their first rodeo, right? So, put all that stuff aside and just start with the basics and don't compare yourself to everything else that's going on. And not only that, but a lot of these people that are saying they made $1 million forget to mention that they spent $1.5 million to make $1 million. So these types of things, I think there's a lot of that hype going around. So, just really kind of staying focused on the problem and your solution will get you where you want to go.
you seem to, I've heard you talk a lot about funnels. Could you take one step back and explain to the audience what a funnel is? I mean, I'm familiar with funnels. I'm not a funnel expert, but could you explain that real quick?
So the funnel, so I use webinars, and that's how I've made most of my money. So it's really just getting the person on the webinar. So how do I get somebody on my webinar registration page, and then they go to my thank you page, and from there I send them an email and say, hey, don't forget to come to my webinar, and they get a series of emails. Then after the webinar, they go into my sales page funnel. So they get directed to the sales page, and they get a series of emails that say, hey, don't come back and buy my course. And, if you want this, then you need to buy the course. So they go in to the course. And our funnel typically lasts about a week. So on Sunday or Monday, we send out the pre-webinar registration. Wednesday's the webinar. And then Thursday through Sunday is the sales page funnel with the cart closing on Sunday night. So like today. And then there's all kinds of different funnels that you can do. Like we can drive traffic to an opt-in page where somebody gives us their email address. We'll say, hey, do you want to know the secrets of starting a 6-figure nurse business? Give us your email. And then they give us the email, and that gives us the ability to send them emails, which is a very powerful tool. But from that page, they go to a thank you page where typically we have a video that says, hey, so excited you're here, and here's the next step of what to do. So we walk them through steps of what it is that we want them to do and what we want them to see in the succession that we want them to go through.
Catie, give our audience one last piece of advice or one last thing that you would like to share that you think that will help them.
So if they're interested in starting a business, my advice would be to really focus on how you like to work, right? So if you want to travel the world and be a nomad, you don't want to start a brick and mortar store. And I know that sounds obvious, but I've had to talk people out of starting some of our programs because I'm like, that just goes against everything you just told me you wanted. So being congruent and aligning yourself with what you believe in and what your purpose is really important. And then finding an audience that you enjoy working with, because if you don't like your audience, it's a huge problem, right? So this is like the one time in life you get to pick the people that you are around, and you will attract the type of people that are like you. So whatever you project out in the world, if your mission and your vision and your values, that's what will come back to you, right? That's the type of audience that you're going to attract. So spending a lot of time and being very thoughtful and intentional about what it is that you're going to do and who you're going to help, and then finding the words to help them, figuring out what their problem is. That's kind of your bleeding neck, if you will. So, obviously there's a lot of problems out there, and not all of them need to be solved, and not all of them are worth, $1 just to solve it. But there are certainly problems that you can attack and you can solve that will be meaningful and helpful to the people that you want to work with.
Connect with Catie. You can do that several ways. First, on her Instagram handle is @nurse_preneur. Also on Facebook, Nurse-Preneurs. You also can connect with her on LinkedIn, Catie Harris, and also visit her website, Nurse-Preneurs.com. Is there anywhere else that you would like our audience to connect with you at? Okay.
No, that's good. That's good.
Great. Stay tuned in also here on Unscripted to everything that we have going on our various social media platforms. Unscripted Authentic Leadership Podcast is the name that we're under there on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Also, our Twitter handle is @UnscriptedLead. Instagram handle is @UnscriptedLeadership. You can also stream this podcast on anywhere you get your podcast from Apple to Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Stitcher, and so forth. Also, you can sign up for a mastermind group on our website, unscripted-leadership.com. While you're there, sign up for an unscripted email group. Once you sign up, you will receive a 10% off merch promo code, all on unscripted-leadership.com. This has been another incredible episode. As always, we pray that you be the leader that God has called you to be. We're here to build bridges and not walls. Bridges connect and walls divide. Until next time, God bless.